Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Herald podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes. To keep in touch with us, use our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, which are all at Q and Review. That's CUEANDREVIEW, or get in touch via information@qandreview.com. That's information@CUEANDREVIEW.com. Please like and share our podcasts and give us any constructive feedback.
The Herald, Wednesday the 18th of May 2022. News. Death toll of autism and learning disability patients revealed. This article is by Helen McCardle. 14 patients with autism or learning disabilities have died since 2015 while detained in psychiatric facilities in Scotland, figures reveal. The statistics were released for the first time by Public Health Scotland, PHS, following a parliamentary question by Scottish Conservative MSP Alexander Burnett, who has campaigned to end the national scandal of otherwise healthy people being locked up for months or years due to a lack of community-based support. The PHS report does not detail the causes of death, but does show that 7 of the deaths occurred in patients who had been resident at an inpatient psychiatric facility for between 91 and 365 days, with 43% in patients whose stay had exceeded at least 1 year. 6 of the 14 patients were aged 65 or older, 3 were aged 55 to 64, 4 were aged 45 to 54, and 1 was under 45. Rob Holland, Acting Director of the National Autistic Society Scotland, said the data was a step forward in understanding the experience of autistic people and people with a learning disability within inpatient psychiatric facilities. He added, while it does not shine a light on the reasons for the deaths, it does highlight how almost all of those that died had been within institutional care for more than 30 days, with 6 people having been there for more than a year. Hospitals are not homes, and it adds further impetus to the Scottish Government's Coming Home strategy to reduce delayed discharge and support people to live in homes of their own choosing. Previous research by the Mental Welfare Commission in Scotland highlighted tragedies, including that of a 40-year-old man with a learning disability and swallowing difficulties who had choked to death while out for lunch with staff and other patients in 2012-2013. An investigation found no lapse in care, and the food he was eating should have been safe. A second case in the same year involved a 55-year-old patient with a learning disability and multiple complex physical problems who died in an ambulance on their way to hospital while subject to a short-term detention certificate. Concerns were raised about their care in the run-up to their death. In February, the Scottish Government vowed in its Coming Home implementation report to greatly reduce long hospital stays and out-of-area residential placements for people with learning difficulties or complex needs by March 2024. It came after reports of some autistic people spending 5 or more years in psychiatric units, despite being deemed fit for discharge. Sylvia McMahon said her son Jamie, now 24, had been left to rot in locked hospital units since January 2017 due to a lack of community care. Another mother who did not want to be named said her son had been in a secure hospital for more than a decade and she had not seen him for over a year. Patients with severe autism and learning disabilities can be detained in secure psychiatric units for their own safety under compulsory treatment orders, with parents sometimes facing legal threats from local authorities for breach of patient confidentiality if they try to publicise their child's case. Mr Burnett, co-founder of Holyrood's cross-party group on autism, has campaigned to free 34-year-old Aberdeenshire man Kyle Gibbon, who has spent most of his adult life in the maximum security state hospital in Carstairs after being detained for behavioural reasons related to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, in 2010. He had no criminal record at the time. A second patient, Gordon Hughes, 24, has been in Carstairs for over 4 years after being moved there against medical advice due to a lack of treatment beds. Mr. Hughes has autism, ADHD, and a learning disability. Mr. Burnett said, "I have been working for several years to highlight how young people with autism, ADHD, and learning disabilities can fall between the cracks. The use of secure care for otherwise healthy individuals is a national scandal, and these figures needed to be made public." Quite rightly, PHS suggests support in the community should be the norm, but there are still too many young people in secure units who will be traumatised by the experience. Each of these tragic deaths represents a person, a family, and a question left behind. A Scottish Government spokesperson said, "Any death is distressing for family, friends, and those close to the individual. However, it is not possible to draw conclusions about cause of death from this data. Patient safety remains a priority for the Scottish Government, and the Scottish Patient Safety Programme continues to be implemented in all NHS boards to improve the safety of care and ensure better outcomes for some of our most vulnerable people." This article is by Helen McCardle. The Herald, Wednesday the 18th of May 2022. News. Scotland nurse and midwifery workforce growth slowest in UK. This article is by Helen McCardle. The number of nurses and midwives registered in Scotland has risen by just 280 in the past year. Scotland experienced the slowest year-on-year increase in the workforce of any part of the UK, amid warnings that staff are quitting due to too much pressure and pandemic burnout. Figures from the Nursing and Midwifery Council show that 3,030 Scotland-based nurses and midwives joined the UK's professional register in 2021-22, taking the total number in Scotland to a record 71,802. However, 2,750 nurses and midwives left the register over the same period, an increase on the previous year and equating to a net gain of just 280 staff or 1.4%. That compares to an increase of 2.6% in England, 2.7% in Northern Ireland and 2.2% in Wales. Not everyone currently on the register will be employed by the NHS, and the figures for those joining do not include those returning after career breaks. However, the figures come after NHS Scotland data revealed a 170% increase in nursing and midwifery vacancies between December 2020 and December 2021. Matthew McClelland, Lead Director for Scotland at the NMC, said the rise in people leaving nursing and midwifery reflects the picture we're seeing for the UK as a whole and shows the impact of pressurised environments, challenging workplace cultures and the pandemic on the workforce. Colin Pullman, Director for the Royal College of Nursing Scotland, said, "With over 6,000 nursing and midwifery vacancies in the NHS and significant shortages of registered nurses within Scotland's care homes, more must be done to retain current nursing staff and ensure nursing is attractive, well paid and meaningfully supported." A Scottish Government spokesman said, "Staffing is at a record high level following 10 consecutive years of growth, with overall staffing up by over 22% since 2006. Our national strategy commits to increasing the NHS workforce even further, with 1,800 additional full-time posts on top of projected workforce growth requirements. There has been an increase in the number of student midwifery places this year, and the shortened midwifery course for existing staff is now open for its second year, which will help deliver safe, effective, quality care for women and their families, as well as developing our existing workforce." This article is by Helen McCardle.
Recorded from the Herald on the 18th of May 2022, from the sports section. Mark Bennett hoping to celebrate new Edinburgh contract with 1872 Cup win over Glasgow Warriors, by David Barnes. Mark Bennett has a golden opportunity to celebrate his latest contract extension with Edinburgh in style, by helping guide the capital side to glory over former club Glasgow Warriors on Saturday's high-stakes 1872 Cup clash at Murrayfield. The 29-year-old centre made the switch eastward along the M8 in 2017 after being deemed surplus to requirements by former Scotland head coach Dave Rennie. By a combination of injury, his own form and Edinburgh's limited game plan under Richard Cockrell means he had unfinished business to take care of in terms of really showing his old club what a mistake they made in letting him go. Bennett has been given a new lease of life at club level this season thanks to the more liberated approach to the game championed by new head coach Mike Blair, and he has started to rediscover the form which led him to being shortlisted for World Rugby's Breakthrough Player of the Year award in 2015, before becoming an Olympic silver medalist with Team GB 7-sides in 2016. It's a great place to be, we're playing some brilliant flowing rugby and building a great home at Dam Health Stadium, said Bennett after putting pen to paper on a deal for the now customary undisclosed period of time. I'm really happy to be staying at Edinburgh Rugby. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Edinburgh need to win Saturday's match to hook their place in next year's European Champions Cup, and if they can overcome a 13-point deficit from their defeat to Glasgow in March, then they will also reclaim the 1872 Cup. This Saturday's match is huge with regards to the playoffs in Europe next season, added Bennett. There's no better match than the 1872 Cup. BT Murrayfield will be bouncing and there's all to play for. Bennett has scored 18 tries and 15 appearances for Edinburgh so far in this campaign, and after missing Scotland's autumn test series through injury, he returned to the national side for the first time in 3.5 years during the recent Six Nations, picking up his 23rd and 24th caps in the losses against France and Ireland at the end of the championship. I've absolutely loved working with Mark this season, said Blair. He's really come into his own as a leader, and we've been really impressed with the way he's carried himself around our younger players too. We all know Mark is a threat with a ball in his hand, and that's been more evident than ever this season. His work rate around the park is exceptional, and he's playing with a smile on his face too, which is really important. We've had a lot of young Scottish players developing into the team, so having smart, experienced guys like Mark is absolutely vital to the way we play. He's going to have a massive role to play in both the 1872 Cup decider and URC playoffs. Meanwhile, winger Darcy Graham has insisted that he ready to hit the ground running on Saturday, when he will return to action following a month out with a thigh injury. I'm feeling really good, he said. That wee break probably came at a good time off the back of a pretty tough Six Nations. It was tough going to South Africa with Edinburgh soon after that as well, so it was good to get a break and refresh to finish the season strongly. The goal was always to get back for the Glasgow game, he added. If things went really well, which they did, I would have been back a week quicker, but we didn't have a game. I trained fully in that week of the Wasps game, but it was just a week too soon to come back for that one. Graham added that he is disappointed on a personal level that Saturday's game has been switched from the Dam Health Stadium to the International Bowl at Murrayfield, but added that he is confident it won't detract from the home team's performance. I think a lot of the boys wanted to play here at Dam Health because we've built a real fortress there, he said. With every game, the atmosphere just gets better and better, but it will be a good experience to be in the big Murrayfield. We've not been there for a long time now, so you could say it takes that home advantage away, especially because we love playing at our new home now. But for the Glasgow game, there will be so many people that there won't be a huge difference. It is a different when you get 4,000 or 5,000 people in there, but this one will have a great atmosphere. I urge people to get tickets and come along. Edinburgh are hoping for a crowd of 25,000 at the match. That article was by David Barnes.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 19th of May 2022, from the news section. Fire by Scots Community Centre treated as willful in police investigation, by Emma Sabliak. A major fire nearby a Fife Community Centre has been treated as willful. The blaze near Dunaker Centre and Lauder Road in Kirkcaldy, Fife, saw plumes of smoke fill the sky on Wednesday afternoon. 2 fire engines were called to the scene around 6:45 p.m, where crews spent 3 hours bringing the blaze under control. No one is thought to have been injured by the fire, but Police Scotland confirmed they have launched an investigation into the incident, which has been treated as willful. A Scottish Fire and Rescue Service spokesperson said, "We were alerted at 6:45 p.m. on Wednesday, May the 18th, to reports of a building on fire at Lauder Road, Kirkcaldy. Operations Control mobilised 2 fire appliances and firefighters extinguished a fire affecting a single-storey derelict building. There were no reported casualties, and crews left after ensuring the area was made safe." A spokesperson for Police Scotland said, "Around 7:10 p.m. on Wednesday, 18th of May, police were called to assist a Scottish Fire and Rescue Service with traffic management at the scene of a fire in the Lauder Road area of Kirkcaldy. The fire is being treated as willful and inquiries are ongoing." And that article is by Emma Sabliak. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 19th of May 2022, from the news section. Scotland's first refugee councillor, Rosa Sally, hopes to inspire and instigate change, by Deborah Anderson. The first refugee to be elected as a councillor in Scotland says she hopes to inspire and initiate change after her historic win. Glasgow girl Rosa Sally will today take her seat in the Glasgow City Council's debating chamber for the first time since being elected as an SNP councillor for Greater Pollock in the local elections earlier this month. Ms Sally has campaigned for the rights of refugees since she was a teenager and, with school friends, formed the activism group the Glasgow Girls, who protested against the dawn raids by immigration officials in Drumchapel in 2005 and inspired a musical drama. And it is this campaigning spirit which is expected to shine through in corridors of the city chambers. Councillor Sally says she will be vocal and wants to bring about change. "It was overwhelming to be elected. There was a great feeling when they announced your name when you have been elected. Rosa Sally. You hear it and I thought, that's me," said Miss Sally. "It means so much to me that I got elected to serve my city, and I have received congratulatory messages from all over the world saying that it is such an inspirational story for young women everywhere. I came here as a child, growing up in Glasgow, and now it is an honour to serve the city and the people of Greater Pollock." Her victory led the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon sharing her congratulations following the win, shedding a very happy tear at this result, from asylum seeker to SNP councillor. Ms Sally, who first stood as a councillor in the 2017 local elections, has a strong sense of standing up for people and giving them a voice. She added, "I want to serve my community and giving a voice to residents and supporting them with their issues, whether it be transport to work, poverty with people struggling to pay bills, and put food on the table. I am here to speak for them. I have a campaigning background which I think is important as you understand issues when people come to you and try to get a solution." While Miss Sally might only have just got her foot in the door, already she believes changes could be made and feels the role of a councillor should be a full-time position. Miss Sally added, "There are many issues I would like to raise and bring to the council. I am someone who likes to make changes wherever I go." She believes making the role full-time would open up opportunities within the council for a younger generation. "A councillor's job is a part-time, but I think it should be a full-time job, because it is so important," she added. "If you get elected as councillor, you are the grassroots to the residents and you're in direct contact with people and the issues they care about. As the role is currently part-time, it won't suit everyone, but we should be encouraging young people to stand for elections as well, to make a change in their community, and maybe the role needs to be full-time so people can give it their full concentration. I'm just in my first few days, and I've just looked into the council offices, but we do need to see more diversity encouraging different backgrounds, or young people and women, to stand for election." Miss Sally, 33, arrived in Scotland as a young girl 2 decades ago when her family was forced to flee Iraq. While at Drumchapel High School, she was one of a small group of pupils who came together to protest at the detention of a friend. From a school petition, the Glasgow Girls campaign grew and soon attracted national attention, highlighting wider concerns about the treatment of asylum seekers. Miss Sally studied at the University of Strathclyde, Graduating in 2013 with an honours degree in law and politics, and later worked with the Scottish Refugee Council and the Education Strategy Commission to establish scholarships for asylum seekers. She also co-founded Scottish Solidarity with Kurdistan, visiting Kurdish regions in Turkey as a human rights activist. 5 years ago, she was inducted into the Saltire Society's Hall of Fame of Outstanding Women of Scotland. It is difficult to come here and set up a new life in a different city, she added. I have been accepted and people think of me as their own. I think with the situation in Ukraine, people can see how quickly life can change. You could be a refugee tomorrow. You could have a great life and then your country is attacked, you become a refugee. It is out of your control, but I think Glasgow now understands what a refugee is. 20 years ago you might have had to explain why you came to this country, but we have moved on and raised awareness, and we have made an impact on what a refugee is. And that article is by Deborah Anderson.
Herald Scotland recorded on Thursday 19th of May 2022. Arts and entertainments. Books. Fans of his dark materials will be pleased to hear Philip Pullman is back with more drama. By Herald Magazine. Fiction. 1. An Olive Grove in Ends. Moses Mackenzie. Wildfire. £16.99. Ebook £8.99. Sion Hughes has a dream to rise to the heights, social and literal, of Bristol's Clifton neighbourhood, but born into the infamous Hughes family, the only way to drag himself out of the deprivation he lives in is to deal drugs. The hurdles he faces are made clear 10 pages into Moses Mackenzie's engrossing debut novel. When he commits a crime, Sion, son of a pastor and in love with the daughter of another, must work out who knows of his crime and who can be trusted. In a manner tender yet unsentimental, Mackenzie describes Sion's battle to navigate this complex neighbourhood, which offers few escape routes from the usual predetermined outcomes for its inhabitants, none of which traditionally end in Clifton. Just 24, Mackenzie has delivered a remarkable debut full of wisdom. 9 out of 10. 2. Here Goes Nothing. Steve Toltz. Sceptre, £18.99, ebook £8.99. For anyone who's gone through the last few years and thought things couldn't possibly get any worse, Steve Toltz's latest novel, Here Goes Nothing, is here to prove you wrong. Angus Mooney is trying to come to terms with his own death as his murderer makes moves on his pregnant widow. Meanwhile, a new, even more deadly pandemic is sweeping the globe. This vision of the afterlife is far from utopian, with the dead taking all the worst aspects of human nature with them as they depart the mortal plane. Toltz, whose debut novel, A Fraction of the Whole, was shortlisted for the Booker Prize, offers wit and plenty of food for thought with this dystopian novel, but if you're looking for a feel-good read, you should steer clear. 7 out of 10. 3. The Schoolhouse, Sophie Ward. Corsair, £16.99, ebook £9.99. Sophie Ward's second novel is a blend of thriller, police procedural and teenage diary, predominantly set in an experimental school in the 1970s. Protagonist Isabel becomes entangled in the search for a missing schoolgirl in the 1990s, as her own troubled past rears its ugly head. The mysteries of the child's disappearance and of what scarred Isabel so deeply 15 years earlier makes the book a page-turner, with some intriguing themes of trauma and abuse. But the links between the cases are tenuous and breakthroughs by investigators solving them appear at times contrived. Some of the violence seems sensational and the motives not entirely convincing. 5 out of 10. Non-fiction. 4. Time as a Mother. Ocean Vuong. Jonathan Cape, £14.99, ebook £8.99. Ocean Vuong is a writer to watch. He proved that in his impossibly moving debut book, On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous. This is his second poetry collection, and he touches upon many of the same themes: sexuality, being an immigrant in America, art, plus throughout the poems he's constantly grappling with the death of his mother. While some of the more experimental poems don't feel hugely accessible, the simpler verses feel more powerful. Vuong is certainly a talented writer, but will likely reach more people with his fiction than poetry. 7 out of 10. Children's Book of the Week. 5. The Imagination Chamber. Philip Pullman, Scholastic, £12.99, ebook £7.99. The many worlds Philip Pullman has created are already impossibly rich, but fans will be pleased to discover yet more layers in this series of sketches and snapshots. Each page is a window offering tantalising glimpses into the characters of his Dark Materials and the not yet completed trilogy, The Book of Dust. The witch Serafina Picala, hovering above a field at night, taking in the stillness of a silence that contains multitudes. Lyra as a child, eating too much cake during a visit from an eminent writer and hiding her vomit under a rug. And Will, a surgeon in training, needing to obscure the true precision of his hands, a legacy from his time as bearer of the subtle knife. Slim in volume only, less is more with this quiet, beautifully crafted companion book. A wonderful stopgap for fans impatient for the highly anticipated Book of Dust finale. 9 out of 10. By Herald Magazine. Herald Scotland recorded on Thursday 19th of May 2022. Arts and Entertainments. Of Blood Descended, Stephen Veerapin, Book Review, by Alistair Mabbitt. Of Blood Descended, Stephen Veerapin, Polygon, £8.99. Born in Glasgow and raised in Paisley, Stephen Veerapin's dual Scottish and Mauritian parentage sparked an interest in mixed marriage and dual heritage in his studies as a historian, particularly in Renaissance Britain. In the course of his research, he discovered John Blank, a black trumpeter who played at the courts of Henry VII and VIII, and for this novel he's invented a fictional son for John Blank, Anthony. Of Blood Descended introduces us to Anthony Blank, a trumpeter like his father, as he returns to the household of Cardinal Wolsey in Hampton Court in 1552, 2 years after leaving it. Not yet 20, Anthony left Wolsey's service in disgust at all the spying that came with it, spying that he himself partook in at Wolsey's behest. He now thinks he was a bit of a fool for giving up such a good job to be a lonely, penniless music teacher, living with his stepmother, but he had other motivations for quitting. Tired of constantly being an outsider, he wanted to undo the traces of his blackness through prayer and godly living. Anthony's been summoned back to Hampton Court because Wolsey, splendidly realised here, wants him to take part in a King Arthur-themed masque, being held in honour of Charles V of Spain, who is in England visiting his uncle Henry VIII for 6 weeks. Anthony's reluctant to prance around to be gawped at playing the Black Knight in an Arthurian masque, but he's persuaded to return to Wolsey's service as an investigator when the dead body of Pietro Gonzaga, a historian from Mantua, is found in the grounds. The temptation is too much to resist. Clad once more in the livery of the Cardinal, Anthony, who was weary of being small, of not mattering, is empowered to investigate in his name. Gonzaga, he finds, had been tasked with studying obscure manuscripts and neglected archives to find evidence that would prove Henry VIII was descended from King Arthur, thus strengthening his hold on the throne. This knowledge directs him towards a murky and dangerous plot involving ancient books, prophecies and murder. The engaging Veerapin falters only on the occasions when he resorts to tired tropes thriller writers should know to avoid, Anthony being taken in by a screamingly obvious trap being the worst offender. But these are easily overlooked in a crisp evocation of Renaissance-era London, which is just enough period detail to bring it to life, but not so much as to overburden it. I particularly like the offhand mentions of the vinegary smell of paint, and the reason you wouldn't see people riding horses through London streets. In Anthony Blake, Veerapin has come up with a protagonist who could sustain several sequels, as well as being in love with a nun, which never ends well. He's a Renaissance hero who doesn't like horses and isn't much good at riding them. A black man who bristles when slighted but was embarrassed by a father he felt didn't try hard enough to fit in. And a conflicted young man who doesn't like to admit, even to himself, that he must have been a pretty good spy in the first place for Wolsey to retain his services now. He also seems at a crossroads politically, having adored the charismatic golden-haired king when he first ascended to the throne. He now sees the cold cunning that lurks inside Henry, and seems to have growing reservations about the system he serves, all of which promises interesting developments in future instalments. By Alistair Mabbitt.
The Herald Scotland, Thursday, 19th of May, 2022. Voices. Alison Rowett. Queen or Nicola Sturgeon? Make the contest for coverage fair. Here is a tale of two queens and their press coverage. The first queen is the official monarch with a capital Q and a crown to prove it. Last Sunday, the UK's main commercial broadcaster gave 2 hours and 40 minutes of prime time over to a celebration for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. One of the show's hosts, Philip Schofield, described the night of entertainment as eclectic,
which was certainly one word for it. Held at Windsor Castle, it was a curious blend of horse show, royal variety performance and school play, with just the faintest hint of "it's a royal knockout" to give it that frisson of a live broadcast danger. Adding to the surreality of the evening was the presence of Tom Cruise, there to pay tribute to the monarch and to plug his new movie Top Gun Maverick. "Incredible," said Schofield, giving the film an impromptu review. "It's everything you would want it to be and more." Cruise paid tribute to the Queen's devotion and dignity, how respected she was around the world, and her kindness in similarly glowing terms. Out in the grounds of Windsor Castle, actors cantered through hundreds of years of history, getting things wrong as one viewer, a Mr. David Torrance of London, the very same, pointed out on Twitter. So, between the accession of King James VI of Scotland to the English throne in 1603 and the English Civil War, he wrote, ITV's Platinum Jubilee celebration speaks of England, Wales, Ireland and Scotland coming together as one nation in an act of union. Did no one Google this in advance? The real stars of the night were the horses and the Queen, who seemed to be enjoying herself, which was nice to see. All through the evening Union flags had fluttered, filling the screen with reds, whites and blues. A cynic might have seen the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebration as one long advertisement for the Union, or indeed for Scottish independence. It could have worked both ways. The point is, though, that the coverage was massive and, save for a few, relatively few complaints, this went unquestioned. It will be the same again on June the 4th. This time it will be the BBC giving hours of coverage to the Platinum Party at the Palace, featuring Diana Ross, Duran Duran, Andrea Bocelli, Sir Cliff Richard and others. Expect more flag waving, and if wall-to-wall reporting in the media does not follow, I will eat my paper crown. Now we come to the other personage in our tale. She is not an actual queen, you understand. The term is used in its modern informal sense to denote any woman of standing in her field. As the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon is a significant figure, not to mention an elected one. When she goes to Washington, D.C. and meets Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, another queen, small q, it is a story of interest, is it not? Indeed, when Miss Pelosi attended last year's G7 Speakers Summit hosted by Sir Lindsay Hoyle in Churley, Lancashire, the coverage was extensive and wholly positive. Miss Sturgeon's US visit did secure coverage, just not as much as her supporter felt was warranted. Some have accused BBC Scotland, and in particular its website, of purposely ignoring the trip for political reasons. The BBC did not see it that way. It said the trip, including the First Minister's comments on climate change, was the lead story on the website for much of the day, with mention of Miss Sturgeon moving further down the story as a fresh line, a comment from COP26 President Alok Sharma was added. This did not convince some observers, one of whom, Stuart Easton, said coverage of the US trip had been noticeably and wrongly absent from BBC Scotland's news coverage. Mr. Easton is a former head of news at BBC Radio Scotland. He is also, as his Twitter bio says, a former head of communications for the SNP at Westminster. Both sides in the argument have a point, but on balance BBC Scotland could and should have done more. As a rough guide, if Nancy Pelosi thinks someone's visit is newsworthy enough to tweet about, you should be giving it big licks too. Moreover, the subjects raised by the FM, including NATO membership and Ukraine, should have been of global interest given what Scotland houses in its backyard. As for whether the BBC's actions amounted to a cock-up or conspiracy, I am inclined towards the former. BBC Scotland cannot win in such cases. Too little coverage and it gets pelters, too much and the same would happen, but from the other side. The ideal Goldilocks formula would just be enough coverage across all media outlets to make for a balanced whole, but it is not in the interest of those who want a fight to take such a broad view. As wearying as fights can sometimes be, they are worth having, if only to keep all sides on their toes. Sometimes that old saw, just because you're paranoid does not mean that they are not out to get you, is true. Take, for example, that utterance by the Queen during the last Scottish independence referendum, when she hoped people will think very carefully about the future. According to David Cameron's memoirs, this was the raising of the royal eyebrow he had asked for to bolster the No campaign. Buckingham Palace, however, was reportedly displeased by his interpretation of the Queen's words. Whatever, it happened, and who can know what impact it might have had? Reporting should be objective, but coverage, how much and where in the running order an item goes, is often subjective. Times and priorities change. Pre-COVID in Ukraine, for instance, the Vardy Rooney libel trial would likely have been given more prominence. There is some appetite for it, but not nearly as much as once might have been the case. People are far more interested in how they're going to heat their homes this winter. The coverage given to the Platinum Jubilee celebrations will be too much for some, just as the amount afforded the First Minister's US trip was, for others, too little. There is no harm in pointing out either of these things, albeit with a little less fervour than has been in the past, just as the BBC does itself no favours by always appearing defensive, so its critics are too quick to see conspiracy when there is none. This article was written by Alison Rowett.
The Herald, Monday the 23rd of May 2022. News. Nicola Sturgeon accused of peddling ScotRail spin over 30% cuts to train services from Monday. This article is by Martin Williams. The First Minister has been accused of peddling ScotRail's spin over the cuts to services as calls are made for urgent action to fix staffing shortages. The accusations have been flying as it emerged that service cuts with nationalised ScotRail mean the last trains to major cities will leave before Scotland's World Cup playoff with Ukraine starts. Ministers are being urged to lay on more trains to ensure the cuts do not stop many of the Tartan Army attending. Train operator ScotRail confirmed it will slash services by nearly a third from next week due to a driver shortage, exacerbated by two pay disputes involving the National Union of Rail, Maritime and Transport, the RMT, and ASLEF unions after the rejection of a 2.2% pay rise. ScotRail says the temporary but indefinite move to Act 700 services, which comes into play from Monday, has come as a result of the drivers' pay dispute, which has meant some refusing to take up the option of working rest days and Sundays. Scotland's key tie with Ukraine will kick off on June the 1st at 7:45 p.m. at Hampden. However, the last train to Aberdeen, Dundee, Perth and Aberdeen will leave before kick-off. The last train from Glasgow to Aberdeen is scheduled to leave at 6:41 p.m. To Dundee it will be 7:10 p.m. and to Perth it will be 7:37 p.m. The last service to Edinburgh is scheduled for 10:15 p.m, at least a quarter of an hour before the final whistle would be expected to sound, and that does not take into account any extra time or penalties. There are now fears that many of the hardcore Tartan Army fans could miss the match. Scottish Labour says that when challenged over brutal cuts to ScotRail services at First Minister's questions, Nicola Sturgeon attempted to pin the blame on workers, claiming they were made necessary by a pay dispute. The party said this echoed excuses made by ScotRail over recent days, as the beleaguered operator struggled to justify widespread disruption. However, Scottish Labour has hit back at what it called cynical nonsense, pointing out that the fundamental problem is a long-standing shortage of train drivers due to poor workforce planning, which has been papered over by drivers agreeing to work on rest days and take on huge amounts of overtime. It said that as of May the 20th, there was not one single ScotRail train driver job being advertised on their website, despite Transport Minister Jenny Gilruth's claims otherwise. Scottish Labour's transport spokesman said it's shameful to see Nicola Sturgeon lifting from the ScotRail playbook and attempting to pin the blame for her government's failings on frontline workers. This cynical nonsense won't do anything to fix the real problems or help the passengers left stranded by this woefully poor service. Rail workers have been going above and beyond to keep things running despite years of poor leadership and failed workforce planning, and in return the SNP and ScotRail are pointing the finger at them while failing to advertise a single job. Public ownership was supposed to be a new start, but instead passengers are being left with higher fares, more cancellations and the same old excuses. Instead of peddling ScotRail's spin, the SNP government need to show some leadership and act to address the workforce crisis at the heart of this mess. Phil Campbell, ScotRail Head of Customer Operations, said we'll be issuing travel advice for the upcoming Scotland internationals in the lead up to the Games. RMT have confirmed railway workers will be balloted on strike action. The union said the timing of its strike ballot would be set out in due course. Minister Jenny Gilruth, when asked if the reduced timetable would be in place until the summer of next year, said, "Absolutely not. We want trade unions to come back to the table, but it is absolutely true to say that the network is dependent on rest day working at the present time." She added, "We need to get to a resolution on pay, and I am absolutely committed to doing so with our trade union partners." A typical ScotRail qualified driver salary is earning £52,000, and drivers are being offered a 2.2% pay rise and the opportunity to participate in a revenue share agreement, which would take the total package to 7%. The RMT union said workers had already been subjected to repeated pay freezes and real terms cuts in living standards. RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch said ScotRail needs to put its hands deeper into its pockets and start rewarding their staff properly. "We are in the midst of a brutal cost of living crisis for workers, but it is still party time for shareholders, speculators and big business executives. All we are asking for is a pay award that reflects the value of railway workers and the service they provide to the public day in, day out." Ms Gilruth said rail service cuts were the opposite of chaos after she met train operators yesterday. She said, "It's not going to be a summer of chaos. I would not describe it as that. Actually, the reduced service is deemed necessary by ScotRail. We need to remember to give passengers certainty." So it's the opposite of chaos, arguably, because it's certainly in the next few weeks about where and when they can travel by rail, but it's not where we should be in terms of provision. I accept that. "I'm absolutely committed to working with ScotRail and our trade union partners to get to a better place, but that requires both ScotRail and the trade unions to work together." Earlier on yesterday, ASLEF's Scottish organiser, Kevin Lindsay, said the public needs honesty and action, not political game playing. From day one, ASLEF has been 100% committed to negotiations. The reality is, we've been waiting on more talks since our 5-minute meet on May the 4th. Since then, we have only heard from them through the media. We have had no correspondence and no offer in writing at any time. We've not had the details of the 2.2% offer or the proposed bonus scheme in writing from them. It is high time ministers stopped the spin and instructed ScotRail to withdraw their attempt to butcher the timetable, which is more about the purse than the passengers, and to get back round the table for immediate, meaningful talks on pay. We remain available at any time, any place, anywhere to save Scotland's railways from these politically motivated service cuts. This article is by Martin Williams. The Herald, Monday the 23rd of May 2022. News. Scotland is at increasing risk of drought and needs to save water now. This article is by Andrew Quinn. Scotland is at an increasing risk of drought and measures must be put in place now to ensure water supplies are kept at safe levels, researchers have warned. They say public and private supplies of drinking water could be under threat due to drier summers and depleted reservoir levels. The project, which investigated how people are affected by droughts in Scotland, was led by Kerry McClymont, a PhD student in Heriot Watt's School of Energy, Geoscience. She worked with Professor Lindsay Beavers from the University of Edinburgh and the project was funded by Scotland's Centre of Expertise for Waters. They have now recommended that Scotland creates an improved early warning system for droughts and uses tourism campaigns to ask visitors to use water wisely. They also said the perception of Scotland as a wet country may encourage people to waste water. Scotland experienced water scarcity in 2018, 2020 and 2021, with the latter being the second driest summer in Scotland for 160 years. At the time, the Scottish Environment Protection Agency said above average rainfall was required to see long-term recovery because a significant rainfall deficit had built up over the summer. Water scarcity and droughts pose a particular risk to private water supplies which supply communities and businesses. Professor Beaver said in Scotland, lots more people have a private water supply than in the UK as a whole, especially in rural areas. This will pose a problem as droughts increase because it makes resilience planning more complex. Around 3% of Scotland's population is on a private water supply, more than 150,000 people. Private supplies are more prevalent in rural areas. 1/3 of the population in Argyll and Bute is reliant on such a water supply, compared to 0.1% of the population in Aberdeen. The research found rural communities on private water supplies may experience enhanced exposure to droughts compared to urban areas. Ms McClymont said, the focus of the research was on the social and environmental factors that affect people's ability to prepare for or recover from a drought hazard. These cover everything from people's age, how isolated they are, and what access they have to early warning systems. The study found elderly or very young people are more vulnerable to droughts, as they are likely to have reduced mobility or poor health. Poor health and low income also make people more susceptible to droughts and less able to adapt in response to drought risk, she added. Scotland is really good at assessing flood and drought risk, but we need to understand the circumstances that can enhance people's vulnerability to drought exposure, to better communicate drought risk and improve personal resilience. This can help to mitigate the impact these factors have on vulnerability. We identified policy recommendations to improve communication around drought forecasting, drought preparedness and drought response to increase resilience for people on a private water supply and more broadly for people across Scotland. The study also noted tourists can be unaware of their water use as well as creating greater demand for water. Each person in Scotland uses about 165 litres of water each day, and increasing water use, population growth and climate change will increasingly affect future water resources. In October, Scottish Water said maintaining some public water supplies remained a significant challenge. The company said it was unusual for it to ask customers in autumn to take simple steps to conserve water. Researchers say the River Spey and the River Tay have been identified as drought hotspots in Scotland, where the frequency of droughts could see a 2- or 3-fold rise. Scotland experienced a drought in 2018, which caused large areas of the country to experience water scarcity, with more than 500 private water supplies running dry nationwide, particularly in the northeast. In 2019, the water level of a Highland loch is thought to have dropped to its lowest in at least 750 years. Loch Va, near Aviemore, had been mysteriously losing water since September the previous year. The Scottish Environment Protection Agency has suggested the loch had suffered due to a relatively dry winter. Last year's drought meant that in July there were more than 30 tankers transporting supplies by road around the country. This was reduced through August but continued in some areas where demand remained high, such as Tinabruach and Skye. People with reduced private water supplies were offered free bottled water through a Scottish Government support scheme. It came after some springs, streams and rivers used for private supplies, particularly in the north and west, were running dry, and despite the forecasts of heavy rain for parts of Scotland, it was feared many remained vulnerable. This article is by Andrew Quinn.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 23rd of May, 2022, from the sports section. Justin Thomas eclipses Will Zalatoris in playoff to claim second USPGA title. Justin Thomas overturned a record equalling 7-shot deficit before beating Will Zalatoris in a playoff to win his second USPGA championship following a dramatic climax at Southern Hills. Chile's Mito Pereira held a 1-shot lead on the 72nd hole after seeing his birdie putt in the 17th stop agonisingly short of the hole, but pushed his drive into the creek and ran up a devastating double bogey. That left Thomas and Zalatoris to contest a 3-hole aggregate playoff, and Thomas birdied the 13th and 17th and parred the 18th to lift the Wanamaker Trophy for the second time, having started the day 7 shots off the lead. That meant the former world number 1 equalled the biggest comeback in USPGA history, John McAfee coming from 7 behind and Tom Watson after 54 holes to defeat Watson and Jerry Pate in a playoff at Oakmont in 1978. Thomas had holed from 6 feet in the par 5 13th to match the birdie Zalatoris had made after finding the green in 2, but Zalatoris missed from 8 feet for birdie on the 17th after Thomas had driven the green in the 302-yard par 4 to set up a 2-putt birdie. Zalatoris then could not hold his lengthy birdie putt in the 18th, and Thomas safely 2-putted for par to get his hands on the Wanamaker Trophy for the second time following his 2017 win at Quail Hollow. Thomas had birdied the 17th in regulation and missed from 10 feet for another in the last, his third 67 of the week setting a target of 5 under par that only Zalatoris was able to match, with Pereira and Cameron Young 4 under, and England's Matt Fitzpatrick and Tommy Fleetwood sharing 5th place and 3 under. Fitzpatrick began the final round 3 behind Pereira, and his chance looked to have disappeared as he followed a front 9 of 36 with bogeys in the 10th and 11th, but the 27-year-old from Sheffield chipped in for birdie across the 15th green to revive his hopes. However, Fitzpatrick pitched into the bunker to bogey the 17th and ended his chances of becoming just the second winner of the USPGA and first in 103 years. "It's a tough one to take right now," Fitzpatrick said. "Just got to try to take the positives. The first 3 days I was immaculate. Everything I was doing was right. Maybe today wasn't quite as switched on. I made too many mistakes on the simple things. I didn't hit it in the fairway enough. There were just a few things today which I could have done better, looking back." Rory McIlroy's second successive Sunday charge in a major had earlier ended in disappointment as his wait for a 5th major title and his first since the 2014 USPGA goes on. McIlroy finished runner-up in the Masters thanks to a closing 64 at Augusta National, a round which culminated in wild celebrations from the 4-time major winner after he holed a bunker shot in the 72nd hole. In stark contrast, McIlroy's closing 68 in Tulsa was followed by him declining to speak to waiting reporters before quickly collecting his belongings from the locker room and heading to his car. The reaction was understandable, given that McIlroy had enjoyed a 1-shot lead following an opening 65 from what proved to be the favourable side of the draw. A second round of 71 was far from disastrous, but Saturday's 74 left him 9 shots off the pace heading into the final round, a deficit he swiftly reduced thanks to 4 birdies in a row from the second. The par 3s had been McIlroy's undoing, however, the 33-year-old playing them in just 5 over par in round 3, even with a birdie in the 14th, and the 6th cost him another shot on Sunday after missing the green and hitting a poor chip to 20 feet. Good birdie chances went begging in the 9th, 12th and 13th, and McIlroy's faint hopes were ended with a bogey on the short par 4 17th. Fleetwood had set the early clubhouse target after 5 birdies and 6 holes from the 12th gave him a closing 67, but said he had not contemplated his total being good enough to win or get into a playoff. "I'm going to be happy wherever I finish," Fleetwood said, I've never thought it was enough, but it was great to have what's going to be my best result of the year so far in a major. And that article was unattributed. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 23rd of May 2022, from the sports section. Lewis Hamilton confident he can return to winning ways after a comeback in Spain. Lewis Hamilton said his brilliant comeback drive at Sunday's Spanish Grand Prix has resurrected his dream of fighting for an 8th World Championship. Red Bull's Max Verstappen raced to his third victory in as many outings after Charles Leclerc was cruelly eliminated from the lead when engine gremlins struck his Ferrari on lap 27 of a sizzling race at Barcelona's Circuit de Catalunya. Sergio Perez took second, 1 place ahead of Hamilton's ever-impressive Mercedes teammate George Russell, with Carlos Sainz fourth. Hamilton's race seemed doomed after just 4 corners when he collided with Haas Kevin Magnussen and sustained a puncture. The 7-time world champion stopped for repairs and emerged last but one, 30 seconds behind his nearest competitor and more than 1 minute off the lead. So gloomy was Hamilton's apparent fate that he wanted to retire his car. But the British driver was persuaded to continue, and he then spent the next 65 laps driving the socks off his machinery to haul himself up to 5th when the checkered flag fell. He would have finished 1 place better, but for an overheating engine, which forced him to surrender position to Ferrari's Carlos Sainz in the concluding lap. "Lewis, that was amazing," said Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff seconds after the race finished. "You were the quickest car out there, and you could have gone for the win." Hamilton's race engineer Peter Bonington added, "It is only just the beginning." Mercedes chief strategist James Vowles also joined in the love-in. "Really strong drive today, Lewis," he said. "You were the fastest man on track." Hamilton might be 64 points behind the new championship leader Verstappen after just 6 rounds. But with 16 races still to come and Mercedes on the road to recovery, is the 37-year-old confident of a swift return to the winner's circle? "Yes, definitely," he said. "We have made a lot of improvements with the car. If I didn't have the issue at the start, I would have been fighting the Red Bulls, so that gives me a great hope at some stage we'll be fighting for the win. I was 30 seconds behind the next driver when I left the pits. I was thinking this would be impossible to get back into the points, but the team said, 'No, you're on for 8th. I couldn't understand it at the beginning, and I thought they were just being super optimistic, but I decided to give it everything and see where I could finish, and it turns out I was higher than 8th. It feels better than a win when you've come from so far back and faced that adversity. Since the final race of last year, it has been difficult all round. I have had difficulties with the car, and constant knockbacks with safety cars and not much fortune either, so it hasn't been easy. But then to come back as I did today, it felt like the olden days, and to me, that is amazing. Mercedes' revised floor and new front wing have helped to all but eliminate the porpoising woes that have plagued their season. Russell was also impressed to secure his 2nd podium of the year. Can we fight for a world championship? You bet we can, added Wolff. We have reasons to believe we can get there. If you look at the standings, it is very hard to see, but motor racing is a different ballgame. We've seen today that Ferrari didn't score a lot of points when they should have, and we will absolutely push flat out to bring us back into the game. British driver Lando Norris withdrew from his post-race media commitments after he was diagnosed with tonsillitis. The 22-year-old, who finished 8th in the 35-degree heat, was examined by a McLaren doctor after the race, but the British team are optimistic he will be fit to compete in Monaco next weekend. And that article was unattributed. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 23rd of May 2022, from the Voices section. Issue of the day, the baby formula shortage gripping the US. Report by Maureen Sugden. Every mother's worst nightmare is unfolding in the United States, with a baby formula shortage that has deepened during the pandemic and is now a full-blown crisis, leaving parents searching for vital milk and, at times, taking desperate, dangerous measures. What's happening? For mothers who do not breastfeed and depend on baby formula to feed their children, the situation is dire in the United States, where children are being hospitalised as a result of parents trying to homemade makeshift formulas, or using any product they can find, leaving some infants who need specific formulas to have reactions against new ones, while other parents are trying to limit the amount of formula they use. Why is there a shortage? From the early days of the pandemic, baby formula was hit by supply chain issues in the same way as many other common products, with ships stuck at ports and warehouses not able to move products due to staff and truck driver shortages, as well as panic buying and issues that ultimately led to poorly stocked and sometimes empty shelves in stores worldwide. It hasn't improved. The closure of a manufacturing plant for Abbott Laboratories, the biggest US supplier of powder infant formula, in Michigan in February, has seen the situation deteriorate. The factory shut after it recalled infant formula products after 4 babies took them developed infections. The firm said there was no link between its formula and the infections, but investigations began. Now, some US states are being hit harder than others, including Iowa, Texas and Tennessee, where more than 50% of the best-selling formulas are out of stock in a situation that is impacting lower-income families harder. More than half of formula in the US is bought under the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants and Children, WIC, Government Assistance Program. Desperate measures. Parents in crisis mode are searching the web and online forums for homemade formula recipes, and although Facebook, TikTok and YouTube have posted warnings over the harms of such content, some babies are being admitted to hospital across the country. Melissa Ryan, Chief Executive Officer of Card Strategies, a consultancy firm that researches disinformation online, said, "Misinformation about the shortage is almost everywhere. Everything from fake homemade formula recipes to conspiracies about what caused the shortage." What is the impact? Dr. Mark Corkin of Le Bonheur Children's Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee, told CBS he was treating babies for reactions suffer from drinking formula different from the ones they usually take. He said, "I've never seen anything like this. They come in dehydrated. We give them IV fluids, we give them nutrition by vein, but that is not a long-term solution." And what's being done? President Joe Biden has taken what many say is late action, launching Operation Fly Formula that will see Mercy flights loaded with 31 tons of formula from Germany into the States before being distributed nationwide. Meanwhile, the Michigan plant is due to reopen in the next 2 weeks. And that was a report by Maureen Sugden.
Herald Scotland recorded on Monday 23rd of May 2022. Arts and Entertainments. Proclaimer's Sunshine on Leith returns to the stage with added songs by Brian Beacom, Senior Features Writer. How do you create a Broadway-style musical packed with Scottish songs which suggests dramatic narrative, resonates politically, and provides all the emotional uplift of a hug from your granny at Christmas? Thankfully, Stephen Greenhorn, who would go on to create the BBC series River City, solved the problem, thanks to a night in the sauce, a light bulb moment, and an unpaid gas bill. And the result was the phenomenally successful Sunshine on Leith, which is now being revived. He rewinds in the demands of 2005. "I had worked with director James Brining during his stint at Tag Theatre," recalls the playwright, and when he took over at Dundee Rep, he said, "Wouldn't it be great if we could do a big Scottish musical?" We thought of finding a composer to write the songs, but it was hard to find a compatible soul. So we reckoned on using the works of a Scottish band. But they often use many different styles, and the songs just wouldn't lend themselves to a narrative. So the likes of Simple Minds, for example, or Altered Images weren't in the running, no he grins. And it became clearer we weren't looking for boy meets girl type songs either. Greenhorn struggled to find such a back catalogue until one night I was sitting in my flat in Glasgow having a few drinks and listening to the Proclaimers' first album, and there's a track on it, The Part That Really Matters, and in the song they speak, which always makes me laugh when they do it. His slightly addled brain screamed out to him that this sounded like a song from a musical. Then I thought, oh my god, these guys have written about everything, about finding love, losing love, being a parent, being a child, politics, community, home. I was so excited. Yet, given he was also a little tired and emotional, Greenhorn feared the light bulb would burn out during the night. To remind myself, I wrote the words Proclaimers musical on the back of my gas bill and went to bed, he recalls. The next morning, the bulb had indeed gone out, but a glance at the missive from Scottish Power brought it all back, and some deep listening to Proclaimers' albums offered up clues about the storyline. which became a tale of two squaddies returning from the Iraq War to their home in Leith. It's about lost loves, holding together relationships and community, with a searing backdrop of NHS cuts and nods to gentrification. 2 years later, the show launched in Dundee, and it coincided with the Proclaimers having a #1 hit, I'm Gonna Be 500 Miles. Then came the film, which attracted a younger demographic and very good reviews. But was there ever a chance the film producers would look to an established screenwriter and the Sunshine Boy would be sidelined? Well, when you sell the rights to turn the musical into a film, you then have to apply for the job of writing the screenplay, and the contract says if the producers don't like the script you turn in, they can fire you and bring someone else in. Her eye smile suggests he was concerned. Theatre considers writers as having an honoured place, but the film world isn't known for its collegiate, friendly qualities. It's all about the director. Thankfully, Dexter Fletcher liked what I was trying to do. He offers a dark smile. I don't know how I would have coped had I not been given the chance to write the film. Back to the theatre show, Sunshine is his baby, and he reveals this new production sees the baby wearing a nice, less expensive but very smart looking outfit. Yes, we wanted to revamp it, to make it tighter, more focused than ever. So we moved away from the large cast and the large number of musicians because the overheads had become too great. Now we have more actor-stroke-musicians, reducing the cost, and we've got more Proclaimer songs being thread, so it's more scored than the previous production. Sunshine is one of many Stephen Greenhorn success stories. His classic play Passing Places became a feature of the Scottish Higher syllabus. He's also written extensively for television, with the likes of Doctor Who, and more recently Around the World in 80 Days, starring David Tennant. But was writing always part of his very being? Past interviews reveal he grew up in Fauldhouse in West Lothian, studied physics at Heriot Watt before switching to Strathclyde University, where his English Lit degree included a life-changing theatre studies option. For the practical part, he wrote a play, Heart and Bone, which won him a Fringe first. He loved this new world, yet surely there must have been a lurking need to batter a typewriter. Well, yes, he admits, smiling. Thinking back now, I was one of those kids who was consumed by stories. If you ask any of my family, they'll remember me with my snorker parker in the house, fully zipped up while watching the television, or in the corner reading a book, with everyone else excluded. Or I'd be in Fauldhouse Library consuming the kids' stuff and then stealing my mum's ticket to read the adult stuff. Growing up in a little mining village in West Lothian, you were left with the sense that stories were great, but they happened somewhere else. It was only really watching the likes of 784 Theatre Company and Bill Forsyth films that I realised stories could come out of Scotland. He laughs, but it took a long time to go from being the boy with the parka absorbing other stories to thinking that maybe I could write them. Sunshine, with its perfect musical accompaniment, connects wonderfully with its audiences. Although it's Scottish rooted in Edinburgh, the show's themes are universal. Those songs travel, they have a truth about them, and that truth will always travel. Further than he could ever imagine. It actually went on in Mumbai, he says in delighted voice. I could never have predicted that one. Sunshine and Leith, the King's Theatre, Edinburgh, June 7 to 18, Pitlochry Festival Theatre, May 20 to October 1, by Brian Beacom.
From the National, Monday the 23rd of May 2022, from the Voices section, Dugmar, Deny, Delay and Defend the Insurance Industry's Key Principles, by Doug Marr. I recently described how a long-anticipated holiday in Gran Canaria turned into a nightmare. To recap briefly, I became very ill and in need of urgent, life-saving surgery. Thankfully, I hadn't skimped on insurance and had taken out a top-of-the-range platinum policy with reputable UK insurers. Or so I thought. The policy document had been suitably reassuring. If you are ill while away, call our emergency assistant line so we can help you. Sounded so simple, but at the end of the day it involved around 40 calls to the insurer's UK-based agents, rarely speaking to the same person, and repeating the same information over and over again. Far from helping us, the process put stress levels through the roof. The hotel doctor had referred me for diagnosis and treatment to a local private clinic, 5 minutes by taxi from our hotel. It was only when we got home that I consulted the Financial Ombudsman Service website that suggests most travel insurance policies do not cover costs incurred in private clinics and cover treatment in public hospitals only. Although there is no reference to that in our policy document, it makes me wonder that if there was a factor in an insurance reluctance to confirm they would meet the €25,000 cost of surgery, at a private clinic. Without covering old ground, the insurers appear to be looking for loopholes to avoid paying out. At 4:30 p.m. on a Friday, for example, my wife was asked to obtain 2 years of my medical records from our GP in Aberdeen. Largely due to the insurer's procrastination and the need for immediate surgery, I was transferred to the public hospital 40 miles away. I don't appear to be alone in believing insurance companies deploy a range of strategies to avoid paying out or paying out in full. A 2019 YouGov report, Better Safe Than Sorry, analysed British people's attitude to insurance. The report revealed a real lack of public trust in the industry. Their principal strategies have been described as the 3 Ds: deny, delay and defend. From my recent experience, I would add the 4th, death. The intention appears to be to wear down claimants, usually causing more, not less, stress. This is particularly hard on policyholders who may be elderly or sick, or in my case, both. Even arranging our delayed return to the UK turned into a severe test of stamina and endurance. The day before our rearranged flight, our insurers contacted us to say I needed further medical tests to obtain the all-important Fit to Fly certificate. It would have been too simple to arrange the test at a clinic round the corner from our hotel. Oh no, we were faced with an arduous 80-mile round trip to Las Palmas, incurring taxi costs of €70 each way. The fact that I had undergone 4 hours of surgery only days earlier cut no ice. There was no awareness or recognition from the insurers and their agents of the stress involved. A lack of familiarity with local geography and distances involved might have been a contributory factor. All in all, if this was being helped, I wouldn't like to experience obstruction. I would like to report that since getting home, our insurance woes have disappeared. Fat chance. Trying to reclaim our upfront expenses, such as the €620 paid to the hotel doctor, has opened up a whole new chapter of deflection, delay and frustration. Naively, I believed the insurer's website that the easiest way to submit a claim was online. I duly completed the form and scanned in all the receipts. Almost by return, 3 emails popped up informing me that they now required, among other things, completion of another form and a lengthy declaration to be made by my GP. I could have wept. My claim could not be progressed without the requested documents above. Why on earth not? A phone call to clarify what was required meant being in for a queue for 30 minutes, regularly being reminded the easiest way to submit a claim is online. Aye, right. The 3 Ds were in full swing. It's not just travel and health insurance that causes claimant stress and heartache. For 2020-21, the Financial Ombudsman Service reported over 44,000 new insurance-related complaints, an increase of 36% in the previous year. Perhaps not surprisingly, the most acclaimed about issue was claim denial. The fact that around 1/3 of complaints were upheld suggests that some companies are at it. Yes, I know a significant number of claims are false and inflated, and insurers have been taken to the cleaners by no-win, no-fee lawyers. Many will have been asked at the car repairers, is this an insurance job? Nevertheless, we're entitled to something a whole lot better. Making a claim is stressful enough without being compounded by deliberate policy prevarication. It's time to stand up for ourselves. From now on, my motto is, don't let the B *** DS grind you down. Watch this space. And that was a column by Doug Marr. Our columns are a platform for writers to express their opinions. They do not necessarily represent the views of the Herald. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 23rd of May 2022, from the Voices section, Leslie Riddoch, we must end the scandal of electricity standing charges. By your columnist, Leslie Riddoch. Very little renewable energy is produced in London. So why is the daily standing charge there the lowest in Britain by a country mile? You don't have to be a raving nationalist to ask. The poorest customers use prepayment meters for electricity. Why is their daily standing charge higher than wealthier direct debit customers? You don't need to be Jeremy Corbyn to ask. Indeed, the far from revolutionary Joe Coburn on BBC's Sunday morning show popped the standing charge question to energy boss Eon yesterday. His answer? Not up to me, Gov. It's Ofgem what sets them. Actually, the regulator ruled that energy tariffs don't need to include a standing charge in 2016, but the vast majority of electrical suppliers still have them. And, of course, the point about regional variations wasn't even raised. Yet it's high time the BBC standing charge rip-off was ended for prepayment customers and for Scots. Firstly, what's the rationale for a regional variation? It's hardly that electricity supplies are in higher quality in the south of Scotland, South Wales and South West England. All have seen 100% charge rises. It's not even that these areas make the smallest contribution to green energy production. Au contraire, Scotland is a net energy exporter, and the wind farm covered south of Scotland helps keep lights on across the whole UK, yet its people are paying disproportionately for the privilege. London, by contrast, was ranked the worst city in England and Wales for renewable energy use in 2016, and green energy production is still negligible. But the energy price structures aren't about today. They're about the last century, when governments wanted to deter coal, gas and our oil power stations from being located beyond cities to minimise energy loss through transmission. Times have changed. Then fossil fuel power stations could be built anywhere. Now renewable energy resources are required, located in remote, non-urban locations. That's why the UK government has finally spent millions securing the Scottish grid. It used to be a one-way street, sending supplies from the energy south to the north. Now the boot's on the other foot and northern green energy is heading south. Reality has changed profoundly, yet the old, punitive pricing structures remain for the energy producers and for consumers. BBC analysis shows daily standing charges have increased by almost 100% in South Scotland, 83% in North Scotland and 38% in London. Why the big difference? Analysts suggest suppliers are shifting part of the unit price for energy, now controlled by the price cap, over as the standing charges. Cute. But that still doesn't explain these glaring geographical charging anomalies. Are Scots being made to finance our grid improvements, even though they're leading the green transition and keeping lights on across the UK? Whatever the real reason, Scots, with the UK's highest levels of fuel poverty, are paying the highest electricity standing charges in Europe, along with South West England. For poor Scots, the standing charge rip-off is even worse. About 4.5 million people in the UK have prepayment meters, and most earn less than £18,000 a year. But while the average annual direct debit bill has risen from £693 to £1,971, the average prepayment meter bill has risen from £708 to £2,107, up to £360 of that was due to standing charge rises, a regressive flat rate levy that must still be paid even when prepayment meters are disconnected or empty. It is outrageous. Essentially, the standing charge is the poll tax of our time, but with less visibility and a lot less political traction. Why does no one seem to care? Certainly, standing charges aren't the biggest part of anyone's bill, but they may be the final straw prompting self-disconnection so people can't cook, store food, wash themselves properly or clean clothes. Even in those extreme circumstances though, the standing charge keeps racking up, and since debt must be paid off before reconnection, even the generous addition of a £30 fuel voucher will not necessarily let prepayment customers switch lights, fridges, heaters and cookers back on. The system is stacked against the poor, Scots and rural customers. It's a shameful situation that's been going on for years. Ofgem says standing charge hikes were brought in to pay for failed energy companies, and charges in some regions have increased more than others because of that reallocation of network costs, which differs between distribution networks. This is obfuscation, plain and simple. Ofgem are letting companies fleece Scots because they can. The long-term answer is to take back control over the whole energy sector through independence, so we can start asking the really big questions. Should energy be renationalised? And why do we need to supply companies if smart meters can't be made to work properly? Meantime, there's a lot of hand-wringing about the difficulties Richie Sunak might encounter trying to direct assistance towards the poorest energy customers. But despite the confusion of our powers and responsibilities in Britain's energy industry, the clout of the Chancellor is clear. He could abolish standing charges and prepayment meters immediately and permanently and devise a new system without unfair regional variations or flat tax rate levies. But he won't, nor will any other part of the broken privatised electricity market. Ofgem haven't bothered to tackle the problem themselves, and private energy companies have serious form in ripping it off the poorest customers, euphemistically dubbed mis-selling. Any new pricing system they devise will inevitably contain craftily hidden charges, and if the big six object to the characterisation as rapacious profit machines that fleece the poorest, oldest and unsuspecting customers, why was a price cap actually deemed necessary by a laissez-faire Tory government? And why, according to the Energy Shop comparison website, have electricity standing charges almost doubled since this cap was introduced in 2019? As a small gesture towards combating destitution, Number 10 should abolish standing charges on prepayment meters, unless levelling up is really just hot air. A comment piece by Leslie Riddoch. Our columns are a platform for writers to express their opinions. They do not necessarily represent the views of the Herald.
And that was this week's The Herald podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes with the publisher's kind permission. Thanks for listening.